The laughter hit me like a slap to the face. Not the warm, joyful kind that echoed in shared memories, but the cold, cruel kind that cut deeper than words. My sister, Charlotte, tossed her champagne glass from hand to hand as she smirked at the man standing beside me. Daniel. He's... What? Exactly, she asked, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of nearby guests at my family's annual gala. Jobless? Oh, Emma, darling, you could have aimed higher. A guy like him? What are you even thinking? The sting of her words was sharp, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I tightened my grip on Daniel's arm. He stood tall, calm, and composed. So composed it only seemed to fuel Charlotte's mockery. The silk dress I wore felt suffocating as I glanced around the room. The elite crowd buzzed with whispers, their jeweled smiles hiding venomous words. My father joined in, a dismissive laugh rumbling from his chest. Charlotte, don't be so harsh. He's probably working on himself. The pause was deliberate, dripping with sarcasm. Daniel's lips twitched ever so slightly, a restrained smile that I knew meant he was about to handle this with far more grace than they deserved. Well, he said evenly, if working on myself means building something meaningful, then yes. That's exactly what I'm doing. Charlotte raised an eyebrow. Meaningful? How noble. Her laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. But don't you think Emma deserves more? Stability, for starters? Or is that asking too much? Before I could reply, my mother chimed in, her tone as sweet and toxic as honey. Emma, darling, you've always had such a big heart. But love isn't enough to build a future. A husband needs to bring something to the table. That's enough, I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. The room fell silent, eyes darting toward us like vultures circling a fresh kill. You don't know Daniel. And frankly, your approval isn't required. Charlotte gasped, her hand flying to her chest like I'd slapped her. My father's face darkened, and my mother exchanged a pointed look with him. But Daniel? He leaned in closer to me and whispered, it's okay. Let them talk. Their words don't define us. I couldn't stand it any longer. Grabbing Daniel's hand, I led him out of the suffocating room. My heels clicked against the marble floor as we made our way to the grand entrance. As the heavy doors swung open, the cool night air hit my face like a lifeline. I'm sorry, I blurted, turning to him. I'm so sorry they treated you like that. You don't need to apologize for them, Daniel said softly. I'm used to people like that. That doesn't make it okay, I said, my voice cracking. You deserve better. They don't see what I see. He smiled, the kind of smile that could melt walls. Emma, I'm not trying to impress them. I'm here for you. And as long as you're by my side, I don't care what they think. His words were a balm to my wounded heart, but I couldn't shake the anger simmering beneath the surface. My family's wealth and status had always been a barrier between us, but tonight, they'd taken it too far. As we drove away from the estate, the car filled with silence. I glanced at Daniel, his profile illuminated by the faint glow of the dashboard. Despite the humiliation he'd endured, he looked calm, even determined. What are you thinking? I asked quietly. That I'll prove them wrong, he said simply. What my family didn't know, what they couldn't possibly understand, was how hard Daniel worked. While they lounged in luxury, attending galas and sipping champagne, Daniel spent countless nights hunched over his laptop in his small apartment. His project was ambitious, revolutionary even, a platform that could bring advanced education to underprivileged communities through AI technology. It wasn't glamorous work. There were no instant rewards, no flashy accolades. Just long hours, sleepless nights, and an unshakable belief in his vision. I watched him struggle, his face lit only by the glow of his computer screen. There were nights when he looked defeated, when the weight of his dream seemed too heavy to bear. But even then, he never gave up. Why do you do it? I asked him one night as we sat on his worn-out couch, a half-eaten pizza between us. Because it matters, he said, his voice steady. Because I want to create something that lasts. Something that helps people. And what about them? I gestured toward my phone, which buzzed with another disapproving text from my mother. They'll never see it. They'll never understand. He reached over and took my hand. I don't need them to understand. I just need you to believe in me. My family's interference grew more aggressive. Charlotte orchestrated dinners with wealthy suitors, thinly veiled as networking opportunities. My father cornered me in his study, his voice firm and unyielding. Emma, he said, pacing like a lawyer preparing a case, you need to think about your future. Daniel is ambitious, sure, but ambition doesn't pay the bills. Ambition doesn't build a stable life. Neither does arrogance, I snapped, crossing my arms. You're so obsessed with appearances that you can't see what really matters. He stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression dark. This isn't about appearances. It's about practicality. You're throwing your life away on someone who can't give you what you deserve. What I deserve, I said, my voice trembling with anger, is someone who loves me for who I am, someone who isn't afraid to dream. And that's exactly what I have with Daniel. The tension between me and my family reached a boiling point when they staged what can only be described as an ambush. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon, and I'd been lured to the estate under the pretense of a family meeting. The moment I stepped into the living room, I realized something was wrong. The entire family was there. My parents, Charlotte, even a few cousins I hadn't seen in years. They sat in a semicircle, their expressions a mix of concern and judgment. My mother stood in the center, wringing her hands like an actress rehearsing a monologue. What's going on? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Emma, my mother began, her voice tinged with dramatic sorrow. We're worried about you. About the choices you're making. What choices? I demanded, though I already knew where this was headed. Daniel, Charlotte chimed in, crossing her legs and leaning back like she was in charge. He's not right for you. Everyone can see it. We're just trying to save you from a mistake. A mistake, I repeated, my voice rising. You don't even know him. You've decided he's beneath us because he doesn't come from money. That's all this is. Darling, it's not just about money, my father interjected, though his tone made it clear that money was very much the issue. It's about stability, security. Daniel may be ambitious, but ambition without results is just a pipe dream. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. You have no idea how hard he's working. He's building something incredible, something that will change lives. Charlotte snorted. Oh, please. Building what? A house of cards? Emma, you're deluding yourself. Love doesn't pay the bills. I couldn't take it anymore. You're all so obsessed with status that you've forgotten what it means to actually care about someone. Daniel is the best thing that's ever happened to me, and if you can't see that, then maybe you don't know me at all. After the intervention, things between me and my family grew colder. They stopped pretending to be polite when Daniel's name came up, and I stopped pretending to care about their approval. The only thing keeping me sane was Daniel himself. He'd been making progress with his project, but it was a slow and grueling process. Every penny he had went into research, development, and testing. His apartment was littered with prototype sketches and empty coffee cups, and his once clean desk was now a chaotic mess of wires and notebooks. One evening, I found him sitting on the floor, staring at a tangled circuit board. His face was drawn, exhaustion pulling at the corners of his mouth. Daniel, I said softly, kneeling beside him, you need to rest. I can't, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The deadline for the investor's pitch is in 2 weeks, and I'm not ready. If I don't nail this, it's over. I reached out and cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. You're going to nail it. You're the smartest, most determined person I know. But you can't do that if you burn yourself out. He leaned into my touch, closing his eyes. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything, I said firmly. And one day the world will see that, while Daniel and I were fighting our battles, my family was busy plotting. Unbeknownst to me, they'd reached out to one of Daniel's potential investors, an old friend of my father's, and painted him as an unreliable dreamer. The investor, swayed by their words, pulled out of the deal days before the pitch. Daniel was devastated. He didn't say much when he told me, just sat on the couch with his head in his hands. They said they didn't think I could deliver, he muttered. That I was too risky. I felt my heart shatter. I knew exactly who was behind it, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. The next morning, I stormed into my father's study, slamming the door behind me. He looked up from his newspaper, his expression calm but wary. "What did you do?" I demanded. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, setting his coffee cup down. "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "You went behind my back and sabotaged Daniel's deal." "How could you?" "Emma," he said, his voice annoyingly calm, "I did what I thought was best for you. Daniel isn't ready for the kind of world you live in. I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" I repeated, my voice trembling with fury. "You're not protecting me. You're destroying the one thing in my life that actually makes me happy." Despite the setback, Daniel refused to give up. He poured every ounce of his energy into perfecting his pitch, using the rejection as fuel to push harder. I watched in awe as he transformed his anger into determination, working late into the night and refusing to let failure define him. 3 weeks later, he got another chance. A tech startup competition was being held in the city, offering a massive cash prize and a year of mentorship for the winner. Daniel entered without hesitation, knowing it was his last shot. The night of the competition, I sat in the audience, my heart pounding as Daniel took the stage. He spoke with passion and clarity, explaining his vision for an AI platform that could revolutionize education. The room was silent as he finished, the weight of his words hanging in the air. And then, the applause started. It grew louder and louder, until the entire auditorium was on its feet. Daniel's name was announced as the winner, and I felt tears streaming down my face as he accepted the prize. Daniel's victory at the tech competition was a turning point, not just for him but for us as a couple. Within days, his name was making waves in the tech world. Articles about his innovative AI platform popped up online, and the buzz caught the attention of investors and philanthropists alike. It was as if all his hard work had finally been validated. But while the world celebrated his success, my family's reaction was a mix of stunned silence and reluctant acknowledgement. My mother, always the queen of backhanded compliments, called me one evening. "I saw the article about Daniel in Tech Innovators Weekly," she said, her voice strained. "It's impressive. I suppose we underestimated him." I didn't bother hiding my satisfaction. "Yes, you did." "Well," she continued, "I hope he remembers who supported him through it all." I laughed bitterly. "Supported him? You spent months trying to tear him down. Don't think for a second that you get to take credit for his success." She fell silent, and for once I didn't care about preserving peace. Daniel had earned this, and I wouldn't let anyone diminish his accomplishments. Daniel's rise to prominence culminated in a televised interview with one of the country's top news anchors. The interview aired on a Friday night, and I sat beside him on the couch, clutching his hand as the opening credits rolled. "Tonight, we're joined by Daniel Evans, the tech visionary behind EduCAI," the host announced. "His groundbreaking platform is already making waves, promising to revolutionize access to education for underprivileged communities around the globe." As the segment unfolded, I watched with pride as Daniel spoke about his journey. He didn't sugarcoat the struggles he'd faced, the sleepless nights, the financial strain, the rejections, but he framed them as stepping stones to success. "I wanted to create something that mattered," he said, his voice steady and heartfelt. "Something that could level the playing field for kids who don't have access to quality education. This isn't just a product for me. It's a mission." The audience in the studio erupted in applause, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. This was the man my family had dismissed as jobless, now being celebrated on national television. The next time Daniel and I visited my family, the dynamic had completely shifted. Instead of the usual cold stares and condescending remarks, we were greeted with awkward smiles and overly warm welcomes. "Daniel," my father exclaimed, extending a hand. "It's good to see you again. I've been reading about your work. Very impressive." "Thank you," Daniel said politely, shaking his hand. "And Emma," my mother added, her tone unusually saccharine. "You must be so proud of him." "I am," I said, my voice cool. "I always have been." As we sat down to dinner, The conversation revolved entirely around Daniel. My parents asked about his plans for the platform, his goals for expansion, and even his thoughts on philanthropy. It was a stark contrast to the disdain they'd shown him before, but Daniel remained gracious, answering their questions without a trace of arrogance. Charlotte, however, couldn't resist slipping in a jab. "So, Daniel," she said, swirling her wine glass, "do you think you'll be able to handle the pressure? Success can be overwhelming." Daniel smiled, unbothered. "I've faced worse, and I have Emma by my side, so I think I'll manage." Her smirk faltered, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Daniel had risen above their pettiness, proving once again that he was stronger than their judgments. As Daniel's success continued to grow, so did his impact. EduCAI was launched worldwide, garnering praise from educators, activists, and government leaders alike. It wasn't just a business. It was a movement, a tool that empowered communities and bridged the gap between privilege and poverty. Through it all, Daniel remained humble. He didn't care about fame or accolades. His focus was always on the mission. And as his partner, I couldn't have been prouder. But our journey wasn't without challenges. The demands of his work often kept him away, and there were nights when I missed the simpler times, when it was just the two of us dreaming about the future. Still, we found ways to stay connected. Late-night phone calls, stolen weekends, and quiet moments where we reminded each other why we'd started this journey in the first place. One evening, my father invited us to dinner at the estate. It was supposed to be a celebratory occasion, but I could sense there was something more behind the invitation. As we sat down, he cleared his throat and turned to Daniel. "Daniel," he began, his tone unusually formal, "I want to apologize. I was wrong about you. I didn't see your potential and I judged you unfairly. But seeing what you've accomplished, it's remarkable." Daniel nodded, his expression neutral. "Thank you. I appreciate that. And," my father continued, "I'd like to support your work. If there's anything the Carter family can do, resources, connections, funding, we're here to help." I froze, waiting for Daniel's reaction. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Carter, but I've learned to build things without relying on others. It's what's made me who I am." My father's face reddened slightly, but he nodded, accepting the subtle rejection. For the first time, I saw a flicker of respect in his eyes. Not just for Daniel, but for me, for choosing him. Years later, as Daniel and I stood on the stage of an international conference, accepting an award for his contributions to global education, I looked out at the sea of faces applauding us. My family was in the front row, their expressions a mix of pride and humility. Daniel took the microphone and spoke about the journey we'd been on, thanking the people who'd believed in him when no one else did. Then he turned to me, his voice soft but clear. "And to Emma," he said, his eyes locking with mine, "the woman who stood by me through every setback, every sleepless night, every doubt. I wouldn't be here without you." The crowd erupted into applause, but all I could hear was the sound of my heart, full to bursting with love and pride. Our journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. Together, we'd built something extraordinary. Not just a groundbreaking platform, but a life filled with purpose, love, and unshakable belief in each other. And in the end, that was the greatest triumph of all. As Daniel's platform gained traction, so did the pressure. The success brought new challenges, legal hurdles, competition from rival companies, and the grueling demands of scaling his vision globally. Every day seemed like a battle, and some nights, I found him sitting alone in the dark, staring at nothing. "What's wrong?" I asked one night as I sat beside him, his hand limp in mine. "I'm scared, Emma," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "What if I can't handle this? What if it all falls apart?" I cupped his face in my hands, forcing him to look at me. "You've faced worse, Daniel. And every time you've come out stronger. You don't have to do this alone." His eyes softened, and he pulled me into a hug. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Just as things seemed to stabilize, disaster struck. A trusted colleague, someone Daniel had mentored, stole key parts of his technology and sold them to a competitor. The betrayal left him reeling, and for days he shut everyone out. "I thought he believed in what we were doing," Daniel said, his voice raw with pain. "I trusted him, Emma." "You'll get through this," I said, though my heart ached for him. "You always do." With renewed determination, Daniel rallied his team, filing a lawsuit against the competitor and doubling down on his efforts to innovate. The legal battle dragged on for months, but Daniel's integrity and resilience shone through. In the end, the court ruled in his favor, restoring his stolen work and solidifying his reputation as a leader who couldn't be undermined. While Daniel fought his battles, I faced my own. My family's attempts to undermine our relationship didn't stop, but something inside me had shifted. I was no longer the meek daughter seeking their approval. I was a woman standing firmly by the man I loved. At a family gathering, my father pulled me aside, his tone heavy with disapproval. "Emma, you're wasting your potential. You could be with someone who compliments you, someone who—" "Stop," I said, my voice firm. "I'm not going to listen to this anymore. Daniel is my choice, and he's more of a man than anyone in this room will ever be. If you can't respect that, then maybe it's time I stop coming around." The shock on his face was almost comical, but I didn't wait for his response. For the first time, I felt free. Daniel's work reached a tipping point when he was invited to speak at a global education summit. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to showcase his platform to world leaders, philanthropists, and innovators. As he stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. His voice, steady and passionate, filled the space as he spoke about the power of technology to transform lives. He shared stories of children in remote villages accessing education for the first time, of families breaking the cycle of poverty through learning. The applause was deafening. As he walked off the stage, I ran to him, tears streaming down my face. "You did it," I whispered, hugging him tightly. "We did it," he corrected, his voice full of emotion. Years later, as we stood together at the grand opening of a new EDUCAI center, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we'd come. The center was bustling with children and families, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Daniel turned to me, his eyes full of gratitude. "None of this would have been possible without you." I smiled, tears threatening to spill. "You've always had it in you, Daniel. I just helped you see it." As we stood there, hand in hand, I realized that our journey had been about more than proving people wrong or achieving success. It had been about love, resilience, and the belief that together we could overcome anything.